Yo, what's going on everybody? It's your OBC, your original Boruto chief, bringing you guys the first official spoilers for Boruto 2 Blue Vortex Chapter 26. And Himawari fans, Inojin fans, and even Killer B fans, it is time to rejoice. Or in the case of some readers, you're gonna grab your pitchforks because there are undertones here for all three characters, including two, or one in particular, more so than the other, that I likely believe that some of the undertones have gone unnoticed by a lot of fans due to it being, you guessed it, something aimed more so towards Japanese readers of Boruto, where Japanese fans or people familiar with Japanese culture will pick up on it quicker, and obviously they're the primary audience, which hopefully this video will lead you to a greater appreciation a little bit more. With the release of the official spoilers today, that obviously means that it's that time of the month again, which means we are now on full spoiler watch for the full leaks to come out any day now. The chapter drops officially on the 19th this month, so next Friday. And as always, depending on when we get the full spoilers or if I only have access to the official chapter, the review will be out 2 days after each one. But as always, remember to support the official release via Manga Plus, which it is free to use to read new chapters. So with that being said, let's unpack everything we have here, because there's ironically a lot. So in the new sneak peek, we pick back up at the Uzumaki residence with Himawari seemingly done from her mental training with Kurama, and we see Inojin in the house with her. He's dropping off a jar of honey for her, honey that is always sold out and hard to get, extremely hard to get. And Inojin replies to her in a way that my sussy baka vibes are now going off, because he says right, and then he pauses before saying he just happened to find it on sale. Totally suspicious, and that is the type of honey that Himawari likes, calling Himawari-chan before she smiles at him, and he gets this sudden soft look on his face and his eyes are a little wider, and then he leaves. So the knee-jerk reaction here is to go, bruh, nothing happened, like my guy Ryan points out on his charts on Twitter. When there's a lore or dialogue heavy chapter that progresses the plot, fans complain that there's no action, but then when we get action-packed chapters with character building dialogue, fans then complain about the slow pacing and no plot progression. The cycle always continues. However, this one page, it hits harder when you know the cultural significance of what's going on here, which I'm gonna briefly break down in a moment. But I want to start with the Killer B connection, because I know that there's probably somebody asking, where'd you get a Killer B connection from? So Himawari in the last chapter was training and she was having trouble with Kurama in that chapter. This chapter that comes right after that, we see her being given a jar of honey that has a bee on it, which is very suspicious timing. And before you say reach, this is not the first time in the Naruto franchise, if you read the manga closely and pay attention, that is placed Easter eggs in the background or in passing to set up future appearances of plot points. Characters like Jiraiya and Tsunade were foreshadowed in the background before we saw them. One example specifically for Killer B in particular is we literally had Naruto being told about an ox a dozen or so chapters before we saw Killer B in the Eight Tails form. Ikimoto is more subtle than Kishimoto when it comes to writing foreshadowing, and in particular when it comes to extensive detail, to a point even small things on the clothing give us insight into the various characters, something he's outright said as much as intentional before. Could this be a setup for Killer B? I don't rule it out. Himawari was struggling while Kurama and Jura have both said that Himawari is closer to a Biju than a Jinchuriki. Someone like Killer B going to Konoha would pay wonders. Or if Kurama still maintains the link with the other Biju, she would be able to speak to Killer B via Kurama and the Eight Tails, since Kurama is the overseer of that chakra. I have to remind you, because I know some of you have probably forgotten, Killer B is not dead in Boruto. When Momoshiki took the Eight Tails chakra, Killer B cuts off his tentacle. We see that in the anime, we see it in the Boruto movie, and it is written in the Boruto movie novel, which is the full version of the script that Kishimoto wrote. Boruto, the manga, never retconned the Boruto movie. The only thing it did was have Momoshiki survive and give Boruto karma to start a new plot. Everything else stayed in place. So Killer B fans, while I'm not a big fan of him showing up. I'm not gonna say that it is impossible. However, now on to the no pun intended. It is time for me to kick the beehive and potentially piss off all the people who are calling Inojin Petal Nojin, which, as a reminder, Himawari is 13 and Inojin is 15. Depending on what month Boruto TBV Vortex takes place, if you had no problem with Sasuke's parents being 6 years apart in age and Himawari being almost 4 years older than Shikamaru, you should not be mad here. But yes, there is some potential romantic undertone here. While I personally, put me on record, while I personally tend to look at it as Inojin was giving a gift to Himawari as a thank you for saving him, it will be irresponsible to not acknowledge, given Ikimoto's subtle way of writing, it might lead to something else being built up, which, as I said last month, any romantic subplots do not take away from the story. I would encourage you to read more than just your standard gateway battle shonen manga. He's taking a heavier route than, say, Yu Yu Hakusho did, but he is taking a lesser route than Rurouni Kenshin did, two of the most iconic and biggest battles shonen in Shonen Jump history. So it's not bad company to follow, and he's threading a very tight needle right now. I'm gonna begin by asking you a rhetorical question. What does Himawari's name mean? It means sunflower. It's why in Naruto chapter 700, when she first debuts, she's wearing clothes with sunflower patterns on them, and she's placing sunflowers at Neji's grave with Hinata. I know that, and most hardcore Naruto fans know that, but you know who else knows that in universe? Inojin, the son of Ino, who runs a flower shop, and on multiple occasions in Naruto and in Boruto has spoken about the meaning of flowers via their names. I want to go a little deeper here. I want to talk about sunflowers in Japanese culture and their symbolism. So, as we said before, Himawari, her name has a hidden meaning to it, like how Boruto is named after Neji because it's a pun on screw and bolt. Himawari is a nod towards sunflower. Then when you get into translations, name one translation means comes out to be turning towards the sun. It represents positivity, loyalty, adoration, and warmth. The flower always follows the sun, hence the name, and hence the other translation, turning towards the sun. It symbolizes devotion and affection. Then when you get into the cultural associations, which is huge, in Japan, sunflowers are often linked to admiration and loyalty. They look up to the sun, cheerfulness, and hope. Their bright yellow color is tied to joy and vitality. They also symbolize endurance. They grow tall and resilient even in very harsh climates. They make them true symbols of strength itself. There are also romantic undertones with sunflowers. So in Japanese flower language, Hanakobata, sunflowers can symbolize a sincere, one-sided admiration, looking up at someone the way that a sunflower looks to the sun. They also carry the nuance of I only look at you, which is a subtle but powerful way of writing if you want to do subtle writing in romance. This could be a one-sided affection by Inojin towards Himawari, and it makes sense given everything Himawari's gone through, the same way that Boruto has not picked up on Sumire and Sarda's feelings. It just makes sense that those feelings are one-sided right now because the two Uzumaki siblings have way more on their plate than romance to think about. Now, I want to go into the jar of honey itself because there's something here I think that does not get talked about enough. Given Himawari's clothes have just changed to more sunflower patterns, and she's talking about how the honey is very hard to get a hold of, my first thought went to is sunflower honey, and there's a lot of symbolism here when you look at that. So in particular, sunflower honey, it is rare and there's a lot of value. It is less common. It is often considered to be premium because there's a lot of labor involved in it and there's a very specific cultivation needed. So sunflower honey is something that is very expensive and it's not something that you see a lot of. And part of the reason for it is, you know, how hard it is to cultivate, but also it depends on what region you're in. So certain regions, like if you're not in France or Serbia, it's going to be harder to get your hands on. And with this being a Japanese manga, I think it's important to kind of point out that in Japan, domestically produced sunflower honey is rare. That's why they import a lot of it. But because of that, it's viewed as a luxury. And that's why there's a high demand for it. And because there's a high demand for it, the prices are higher. Hence Himawari's language. A jar of sunflower honey would not be a throwaway gift. That is not cheap. And more importantly, for Inojin, it shows thought because he picked up on how Himawari enjoys this particular type, as well as effort, as well as expense. He went out of his way to get it. That is why he said right, and then he paused, and then suddenly he says, oh yeah, it was on sale. Something that is of high value like that is likely not going to be on sale. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is how there's a sweetness and affection symbolism with sunflower honey. So honey itself is symbolic of sweetness and nourishment and care. In Japanese, in particular, gift-giving culture, something that I would venture to say most people here do not know. Food gifts specifically and often, more often than not, imply intimacy because they require a knowledge of the recipient's taste. So there's a layer of meaning here for this. This was a very intentional thing. The very same way that people got outraged over Himawari living alone and had to break down, hey, that's part of a cultural thing. There's a cultural thing here. So the layer of meaning is that Himawari, the sunflower, receives sunflower honey. It's very poetic. Inojin isn't just giving her something that she likes. He's acknowledging her very namesake and essence. Again, he would know this because he's Ino's child. And more often than not, just based on how the Yamanaka clan have done that flower shop, the children have worked in it, and the children, more likely than not, like Inojin and like Ino, were taught some of the basics of flower language. It is a symbolic offering that ties directly into who she is. When you break down the interactions, it's very specific. Look at it step by step. You have Inojin's attentiveness. He notices Himawari's specific presence. In Japanese culture, being attentive to small details about someone, in particular what they like, it is a very clear sign of affection. Again, Japanese culture is different than ours. That is why Sumire was freaking out when Sarada hugged Boruto, because hugs are not something that you do in public. That is a invasion of close physical space. That's typically something reserved for survivors of shared trauma or for lovers. That is why she freaked out and snapped on Sarada. But getting back to Inojin, he doesn't just buy any type of honey. He is buying her favorite type. Then you have his hesitation. Right, I just happened to find it on sale when I went. That pause before right suggests nervousness or downplaying. This is a classic anime and manga body language trope for someone trying to cover up intentional thoughtfulness with casualness. I'm working on a really big My Dress Up Darling video that will be out on my Anime Explained channel in 2 to 3 weeks, but that's something that you see a lot in that manga. He also has a soft look on his face. When Himawari smiles and says thank you, he gets a softened expression. That is not neutral kindness. It is framed as a moment of quiet joy as her happiness is being shown, which often in manga points towards deeper feelings. Going back to Yu Yu Hakusho, we saw that with Yusuke with Keiko at times. We saw that with Kurobara and Hiei's sister. Then when you get into the subtext of effort, the fact that this honey is very popular and usually sold out makes his acquisition of it even more telling. He went either out of his way to get it, or at the very least recognize his value when he saw it. Either way, however you want to break it down, it suggests high effort. Then you get into the possible romantic undertones. Again, Himawari equals a sunflower. Loyalty, warmth, admiration. Sunflower honey equals a rare, sweet, thoughtful gift tied directly into her name. Inojin equals the attentive, nervous, and the guy that is suddenly softened by her gratitude. We've never seen Inojin look at Himawari this way. When you put this together, this is a scene that is laden with romantic subtext. He's signaling care and admiration without openly confessing. The sunflower imagery doubles as a metaphor. She is the sunflower, and he is offering her the sweetness that comes from her own essence. Almost as if he's saying, you deserve this because of who you are, which I gotta say, you gotta give me that. That's a bar right there. She is the sunflower, and he is offering the sweetness that comes from her own essence. Now that's hot right there, ain't it? So from a storytelling perspective, this is the kind of quiet gesture that often foreshadows potential romance. So in conclusion, in Japanese culture, sunflowers, again, symbolize admiration, loyalty or looking only at one person. Honey, especially sunflower honey, adds a layer of sweetness and rarity, and effort and gift giving is here. Inojin's hesitation and attentiveness and his soft reaction suggests that this is not a casual friendship, or at the very least, he's like Sarda and doesn't realize it yet. It carries a romantic undertone. His gift to Himawari acknowledges both her preferences as well as her symbolic identity as a sunflower, making it a meaningful gesture that strongly hints towards a budding crush. Now, given this arc, now I really want you to pay attention to this. Given this arc, looks like it is dealing with Momoshi's obsession with Ada, leading to him tracking her down, and Ada's character being so heavily centered around trying to understand and feel outside love but beyond her brother, and Jura's fascination with how love makes shinobi stronger, which that is not new, that is something established in Naruto's manga. And now we have Inojin and Himawari in this scene, in this subtext, two characters that Jura is extremely fascinated with. It's something that you want to file away in your back pocket and pay close attention to the next time we get Himawari versus Jura round 2, which that is definitely going to happen at some point, because this subplot might be used to further that battle and raise the stakes. Not saying Inojin is going to be a damsel in distress. I'm not saying that, but I think I know which manga plotline Ikimoto has taken some inspiration from and put his own spin on. Quick reminder, we are again on spoiler watch, but likely it'll be Tuesday when we get the full spoilers, unless the high quality V-Jump magazine cover leaks out on Sunday, due to it being damn near impossible to get the magazines on weekends in Japan or to even data mine. But when they do drop, I'll have the spoiler video for you guys the same day, though it might be a little later in the day, and the review will likely be up in the next 2 days afterwards, and the chapter officially drops on the 19th. In the meantime, click here to watch this Naruto Explained video, or click here to check out more videos from other two anime channels where I talk about non-Naruto content.